Hello again, friends, and you are our friends, and good morning, and welcome back to another edition of Jim Cornette's Drive-Thru right here. What drive-thru is open in the morning? I guess a few of them are now.
You have lied to the people already because you are a lazy ass and you never fucking appropriate this thing out into the community until noon on a Monday. So it's not good morning, it's good afternoon, it's just good morning. Because you're apparently having such a good morning while I'm freezing over here and fucking shivering and goddamn watching the snow come down in Louisville, Kentucky, for fuck's sake. You're apparently somewhere on the south of France having your fucking French toast in front of a goddamn roaring fire at a fucking ski lodge. The more I think about it, the more I just like to come over there and just slap you.
In fact, I'm in my office, not a ski lodge, and I did just have French toast. Suzanne made French toast for the first time in a while, and it was delicious.
How long?
It's been a while. While.
How long were you sober from the French toast?
Well, if I'm going to be very honest, actually, we tried it a few weeks ago from a local restaurant for breakfast, and it was horrible. So I don't count that because I didn't like it.
Well, was it the French Toast Chateau?
No, it was, I don't want to name the restaurant because...
When I have a shitty experience, I come right out with it. I name names. I point fingers. I j'accuse.
I like their other food, so I don't want to really hit them hard with this food.
You don't want to get banned because you like some of the other. You like the fucking chicken gizzards and red eye gravy, but you don't like the French toast.
They just recently added breakfast. We had it twice. The first time it was amazing. The second time it was, I'm never eating that breakfast ever again.
But you'll lower your standards to go in there for lunch or dinner, then, is what you're saying.
Well, dinner, yes.
Yeah, or supper.
We don't call it supper up here.
Y'all have supper up there?
We do not have supper up here.
The first time, fucking Jericho, I think he put it in his fucking book. I shouldn't say fucking book. It was a good book. It was a good fucking book. But the first time that Chris Jericho and Lance Storm, I fly them down from Calgary to fucking Knoxville to see about coming to Smoky Mountain, which just coincidentally, they came in the weekend we had Sunday Bloody Sunday. Terry Funk and Bob Armstrong in a Texas death match and blah, 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 this whole card. And we had like 3,300 people or whatever in the Coliseum. And they're going, oh my God, we're going to come here. So that was a good thing. But the first question that I asked Storm and Jericho, when they got off the plane and were walking away from the gate, they could not understand me. And the way that Jericho writes it, he spells it out phonetically. It is like I just kept saying over and over, Jeet, 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 Jeet. And they couldn't figure out. I'm saying, did you eat? Jeet. Have you eat yet? Jeet, Jeet lunch, Jeet dinner, Jeet breakfast, whatever fucking part of the day it is. Jeet?
Supper.
So I took him to supper over at Calhoun's. And then that was the first time they'd ever seen the Calhoun's on the river there in Knoxville. Had the fried onion, the awesome blossom, right? And whether it's at Outback, it's the, bloomin' onion or wherever the fuck, it's the awesome blossom. They'd never seen an awesome blossom. Those poor, deprived Canadians from out there in the prairie. I felt like they had physically just come from where they were living in Stu Hart's tent out on the Alberta prairie in the middle of the winter at the turn of the century, that they had never seen the fried onion extravaganza known as the awesome blossom before.
What a scintillating story that was, Jim.
Well, you got me in that direction. I don't know why you insisted I tell it. You're the one.
What did you have for breakfast?
What? I haven't had breakfast yet. I don't want to eat and then immediately talk to you. For heaven's sake. No, I mean, I might get slow and slazy or slow and lazy, whichever one. And then it would bring the show down. I don't want to do the show on a full stomach. I don't want to be sluggish. I always try to get a good night's sleep the night before that I do a program like this so that I can disseminate the information, place these little tidbits of information underneath the pillows of the cult of Cornette members out there, sort of like the Tooth Fairy.
Oh my God. We just had a thing this morning, actually, where I heard howling coming from the kitchen downstairs. So I run all the way downstairs, and our middle daughter, who's 9, I'm going to whisper so she doesn't hear and bust in the room and yell at me and start reacting this way again.
What is she got multiple personalities? What are you saying?
Well, no, she was howling because she found out that the Tooth Fairy wasn't real. Because the Tooth Fairy forgot.
What?
Well, the Tooth Fairy forgot to put money under her pillow 2 nights in a row because the Tooth Fairy forgot to go to the bank. So the Tooth Fairy isn't real.
Wait a minute. Hold on. Before we even go any further, I know there's inflation and shit, but since when do you have to go to the fucking bank to put money under a kid's pillow for a tooth?
Well,
what is the going rate these days for the Tooth Fairy?
It's not about the going rate. It's about the fact I haven't had cash in hand and either has Suzanne.
You can find that in the fucking couch cushions. I used to get a quarter.
A quarter?
I got a quarter when I got anything.
What year was that you got a quarter? Let's talk inflation.
What would it have been? 1965? I don't know.
So how much is that with inflation?
I don't have time to pop the inflation calculator up there, but it was probably about $1.50. Fuck, rummage around in the goddamn coin cup container in the car. But anyway, she was that upset.
Well, first of all, you got to put at least $5. And you usually have to have some gum or something with it, too. So it's usually a cash prize.
Stick it to the pillow?
Well, no, not loose gum.
Why would you want to give a child gum that had just lost a fucking tooth? Are you trying to pull them all out?
I don't know where this started, but it was a Long Island thing, and now we've carried it over here to New Jersey. And at least $5. Yeah, so she just found out. That.
Well, wait a minute. Okay, but she was that upset.
Oh, yeah.
And I don't know when I was a kid if there even was a moment of revelation on the Tooth Fairy. I don't know that I got. Actually, I don't know if I got consistent money or if they just established it a couple times when I was particularly upset about losing that tooth. Because I remember one time, my baby teeth, these are baby teeth now, but one time my mom did prefer the theory that I should do it downstairs in the bathroom, the thing that they used to do at her house back in the country in the old days, and tie the string around one of my teeth and the other end of the doorknob to slam the door, and I'd take care of it. But I digressed on that and let it come out on its own. My baby teeth I've always been that way. I don't want to have teeth, but my baby teeth used to just kind of fall out eventually. I wouldn't fuck with them too much. But I don't know that the Tooth Fairy was ever a big deal. The Tooth Fairy is like the job guy to me of fucking fantasy children's things.
No. You got it wrong.
Because
the Tooth Fairy is Rough House Fargo. The Tooth Fairy pops in for big occasions and pops out, leaves you with a nice gate, and then disappears.
No, because number one, motherfucker, I only got a quarter, so and I'd rather not lose the fucking tooth and go through that and all that shit. So actually, I never wanted to see that fucking Tooth Fairy to begin with. I don't care about the money. I wanted the Tooth Fairy to stay away. I was okay with the Easter Bunny because we got hard-boiled eggs and chocolate and like the local independent station would play The Adventures of Robin Hood on a special Easter movie theater or something in the morning. So Easter Bunny is okay with me. And of course, Santa Claus was fucking, Buddy Rogers or Ric Flair or whatever. But Santa Claus was the top guy by far. You wanted Christmas to come. You cleaned up in goods and merchandise, cash and prizes. There was food everywhere. When you were a kid, you liked your fucking relatives and they would all come or you'd go to their house. And that was a big fucking, and it lasted days on end. So Santa Claus was the man. He dropped the leg on every other fictional fucking creature. Easter Bunny was second because, like I said, at least you got eggs and chocolate and the family still and good movies. But a fucking Tooth Fairy, you never know where it's going to happen, when it's going to happen. One time I ate one of my front teeth when I was a kid. We were next door at the neighbors. And I was eating an ear of corn. And when I finished eating the ear of corn, I had no fucking front tooth. And I'm like, what the fuck? And I didn't eat corn for over 10 years after that. Till I was in my late teens was the next time I would eat. And I've had problems with that tooth to this day. Not the same one. It's a different one now. But that's beside the point. And that's confidential information, motherfucker, between my dentist. But the point is, so Santa Claus was on top. Easter Bunny was over there, but fuck the Tooth Fairy. Fuck that fairy in the ass.
That's not the way a little girl thinks. You got it the order backwards. It's Tooth Fairy, and I know this because I saw how it transpired in the kitchen earlier. It was Tooth Fairy and that reaction, and then it hit, oh shit, the Easter Bunny. Is the Easter Bunny? And then it was another big reaction. And then it was the big reveal. And what about Santa Claus? And then that brought the house down. That was the big one.
But so she had the triple revelation all in one fell swoop.
Oh, the next one is the wrestling one. I still haven't done that.
Well, you better not.
Well, hold on. She's 9. You don't think I should? I should just let her go now through
No, because then she's going to run her mouth to all the fucking kids at school. That's the reason why the boys never smartened their kids up until they were in high school or whatever.
But what if you could tell her that it's similar to the Easter Bunny and Santa? Because we did explain to her that, look, you now know this. It's a power that you have. You have to protect this because there are still kids in your class. And obviously there are kids in your school who are younger who don't know this. You need to now be in on it. You need to.
I don't care whether she blabs about the Easter Bunny and Tooth Fairy and fucking Santa Claus or not. But you better keep that little fucking kid from fucking exposing the business, or I'll come up there. Just don't smarten her up. It's easier that way.
Uh-oh. Why not? I know how to stop you.
What she did just validated my theory because look, she found out about the Tooth Fairy, which was your fault. Sloppy. It was your fault.
It was Suzanne's fault.
Suzanne, bad kayfabe on Suzanne's part. She found out about the Tooth Fairy, but then she thought about the Easter Bunny. Because Easter Bunny was always a little bit more credible because, once again, fairies just out of thin air, but I can see rabbits. There could be a rabbit with the power on Earth to fucking hop around and goddamn carry a basket. I've seen shit like that on the Ed Sullivan Show when I was a kid, that age, where the dogs and the trained seals did that. So the fairy is just out of thin air and just preposterous. And never something I was into. I couldn't believe it. The Easter Bunny, there are real rabbits. You never know about these things. And I never spent too much time thinking about how they'd get in. And a lot of times the eggs were outside anyway when you went to look for them. So that's a little bit more credible. But Santa Claus, a human being with historic precedent. They're talking about St. Nicholas, right? We used to read this even when we were kids, the backstory of Santa Claus. And he's got 2 arms and 2 legs, even though he's a fat guy. I got a big fucking chimney when I was a kid. Matter of fact, I actually looked up that chimney, and since then, obviously, I've had chimney inspectors and professionals in there. A human being can get in this fucking chimney. So that was always a little bit more plausible and a little more credible. Plus, the fucking hall was enormous, and you got more stuff. So Santa Claus has always been the most realistic to me.
It hit her
That's
too.
Just me.
We talked about the Santa Claus thing in the kitchen, and she started calming down a little bit, and her older sister said, "It's okay, everyone knows." And then when she heard everyone knows, she lost it again. What do you mean everyone knows?
Oh, well, see, now you've been keeping it from her.
Everyone has. I mean, we said to her, everyone's in on it. Look, NORAD every year has a thing where you can go on Christmas and track where Santa Claus is flying with his sleigh and Rudolph and all the reindeer and all the gifts he's just dropping. Oh, look, he's in Zimbabwe. Oh, now he's in Egypt. He's just flying all over the place, dropping gifts. Everyone's in on
it. What you've done is you've psychologically damaged that child now, to where now she thinks that the whole world is engaged in a conspiracy to deprive her of knowledge and to deceive her. And that's the way you create a supervillain, you know. But don't smarten her up about the wrestling business.
I'll tell you, wait until she finds out the Undertaker isn't really dead. That'll be a big one.
Well, anyway.
Ric Flair doesn't really have money.
Well, God, now stop it. Transitioning briefly to, I just want to thank everybody, Cult of Cornette members out there who have been responding to the incredible opportunity in Chicago on March 23rd to have a beef with Jim Cornette at C2E2. The Chicago Comic and Entertainment Expo. I'm going to be there once again at the Cornette's Collectibles booth all 3 days, making deals, signing autographs, pissing people off. But on Saturday night, March 23rd, as part of C2E2 After Dark, you and I can all get together, and we can come together, and I am we, and we are we, and you are we, and we are all together. Cuckoo, Cachoo. As part of the Have a Beef with Jim Cornette VIP gathering. You get the stand-up meltdown. You get the interactive Q&A. We're going to tell old Chicago stories of my interaction and others in Chicago. We're going to answer all the questions you want to ask. You get a free 8x10 autographed, free photo op, personal hangout time, and a Chicago Italian beef sandwich. Everybody's a VIP in this one. There are no curtain jerking tickets, so get them early because they're limited. $65 all in for everything. My God, that's the equivalent of just the photo op opportunity and the signed 8x10 at most conventions. But I'm cheap. I'm a cheap date. And I'll work harder because I'm not that good looking. I'll give you more for your money. Admission to C2E2 is not required. It's a separately ticketed event at tinyurl.com/corny in Chicago. Buy cracky. And then afterwards, you can buy. What goddamn, you're not going to say anything. Fucking dead air here.
Buy cracky.
Afterwards, we will have burger towels so you can wipe all the greasy goodness off your face from spending 3 hours with me working hard to please you. And if you don't feel like you got your money's worth, that you want to take me to court, well, what should they do, Brian?
There is a man I know who is always prepared to take a big money bags like Cornette to court. And we're going to tell you more about him right now.
What? No, Stephen P. New he's on our side. Me and you, maybe not you anymore, and the cult of Cornette. He's on our side because we're not the money bags. The big corporations are the money bags that poison you, and deprive you of things, and or take the things that you have, and or give you things such as diseases, or in the case of, as we mentioned here over the last several weeks, especially. Because of West Virginia being the epicenter of the opioid crisis, he has had tremendous amounts of cases over the last little while with some of the children, on behalf of the children, I should say, who can't speak for themselves, that are born addicted to opioids. But all that and more. The man to call, Stephen P. New, newlawoffice.com, 888-692-8084. I've been laughing and joshing that he's going to be there April 13th, by the way, in Madison, West Virginia for All-Star Wrestling for the midnight reunion and so much more. And I've been joshing and laughing that he's going to be bringing 8x10s to autograph for the fans there. And that is actually, I just made that up. That's not true, because the last wrestling show he went to, he had 3 8x10s and he autographed them, and it took him an hour and a half because nobody would take them. So he has quit doing that at wrestling events. But I'm kidding. I'm joshing with Steven. Our ex-sponsor here on the program. Anyway, no, in all seriousness, folks, the champion of the little guys, we've said many times before, including those who cannot speak for themselves. He is the voice of the voiceless. Not, as we mentioned about Paul Heyman here not long ago, the voice of the homeless. So if you have, or your family, or your friends, or anybody in your immediate social circle have been wronged, taken advantage of, or otherwise damaged and harmed, Stephen P. New is the man to call, 888-692-8084. If you need to sue, call Stephen P. New, because new is for you. And Brian, at that, what is new here on the program? We've done half of it now, haven't we?
We've done a little bit.
Are we rolling tape? Are we on tape?
We are on tape so far, but what's new is we have new questions from the listeners that are sent in a number of ways to CornyDriveThru@gmail.com or on Twitter using the hashtag CornyDriveThru. And actually, this first one here, Jim, is a little bit of an addendum to the previous week's Jim Cornette experience. This is from Charlie Conley. Hello, my cult leader. Love the experience about February 2nd, 1986. Great show, but you forgot one important thing that happened on that day. February 2nd, 1986 was the day that Gino Hernandez was found dead.
Oh.
And then I guess he was just giving us that note right there. But any thoughts on Gino, Jim?
Well, that took a disturbing turn real quick. I thought we were going to follow up on, and as a matter of fact, we have got follow-up. Before I talk about Gino, there's no sense backtracking to this, but we have got follow-up. A couple of cult members have written in The card in Cincinnati with Hulk Hogan and Terry Funk, we had ascribed 5,000 people to, actually was reported somewhere at 10,000.
Wow.
And a very good source, an old friend and compadre of mine who probably need to remain nameless. Who knows? I may get heat on him, but said that he's from the Orlando or from the Florida territory, and said that the Florida show that night was in Orlando, and we had given 1,000, and they had about 1,500. So 55,000 or so live tickets for February 2nd. But anyway, no, Gino was there in world class when Bobby and Dennis and I first got there. And it was obviously Chris Adams had a great run as a babyface there at first, and then they'd switched him heel. And when we came in, pretty much the programs were Gino and Chris working with Kevin and Kerry in singles on the spot shows and or the big shows, or rotating tags. One Man Gang with Gary Hart was there also, and he had a program going with Kerry individually apart from them, because Mike had still, right until about the time that we got there, had been sick but had gotten back in the business. But otherwise than us and the Fantastics, that was pretty much the roster. I mean, Brian Adidas was always there because he was a friend of the Von Erichs. He was a good underneath babyface. And they brought Rip Oliver in for a brief time when they brought Billy Jack in, and he left. I mean, it was a small crew. So, Gino was a tremendous talent, and especially for the territory days. And I don't mean that he couldn't excel on a main stage like the WWF or whatever. I mean, his body would have hurt him with Vince, but probably not the fans, because he could work. And he actually could work better as I've gone back and watched more tape, especially of him in San Antonio and a couple other places. He took a lot better bumps and a lot more of them when he wasn't working on those fucking concrete, hard-ass world-class rings, especially in the Sportatorium. Dennis Condrey it bugged him to death, because every time Gino took a fucking bump, he put his hands like a backdrop. He put his hands down first. And that just used to bug, because Dennis, had those perfect snap, boom, boom, boom. But then after he'd worked in Dallas for fucking 3 or 4 weeks, we'd been there. He actually said, I'm starting to understand why he fucking does that, because that ring was horrible. But anyway, but Gino excelled in a situation like that because he was living his gimmick, which wasn't a gimmick. It was him in Dallas, Texas, making 150 grand a year or so in a top spot like that, working with the Von Erichs, being on television, and still having time to have a life, driving that sports car around Dallas, Fort Worth, and doing all the other things that we now know that he did, good and bad. I don't think, I mean, because he had the ego, he would have wanted to be a big star in the WWF and travel across the country and boom, 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 and he'd wear the suits. And it would look like Flair doing it, but I don't know whether he would have kept it up as long as Flair did. I don't think he would, I don't know if that lifestyle would have been his. And at the same point, once again, Gino was a great old-fashioned heel and had that cocky look, and he could do a promo good, and he looked fucking great, but he wasn't a superhero physically. So when the business changed, he was very Piperish in all those qualities, and Roddy was the guy whose personality made him stand out, and he overcame that. He never was fucking huge. Gino didn't project the toughness that Roddy could, whether it was, in a worked or shoot situation. I don't know whether he would have made it in the WWF or not. WCW, 3 years after he died, was on its fucking ass anyway. So if he hadn't gone to New York, he'd have probably been buried with all those 90s guys in WCW that you never heard from again.
You were working for Crockett when he passed away. Do you remember how you heard, who you heard it from, and were you surprised?
Well, I cannot remember. Probably the Wrestling Observer in those days, to be honest with you, because if it was on a Sunday, well, no, you know what? We would have heard we would have heard by the next Tuesday at TV. We would have heard somebody in the locker room would know by then, because it's not like I was in Gino's social circle. So friends of his would not have called me. It wouldn't have been on any kind of national news that we could read, but somebody would have called somebody in the locker room by the following Tuesday.
What about the Houston office? Would someone have called you from the Houston office?
No, I've talked to Bruce often, even in those days, but I don't think he would alert. He wasn't alerting me to all the passages, especially as it began to become a trend at that point from the state of Texas. So it would have been a TV from one of the boys, and surprised. Probably still was then. It's been so long since I was actually surprised when something like that happened to anybody in the business. But probably, yeah, at the time, because it wasn't common. And yeah, and I can't remember what was the first theory. What was the first story that went around? Because were people starting to suspect foul play yet, or how did they present it?
I'm not exactly sure when they suspected foul play, but two things I know of. One was there was a theory that it was suicide. There was a theory that he just ingested too much accidentally. And then there were fans who, I believe, started calling the police station and reporting that they thought Chris Adams did it.
Yeah, because Adams was getting even because he had just blinded Chris Adams in the angle. No, knowing Gino, I assumed it was accidental, obviously. And then later on, people were like, well, it doesn't look right. But I think that was a lot of people that wanted to romanticize some things, but you never know. But no, I always liked Gino. He, like I said, we didn't hang out in the same social circles because he legitimately, after the Sportatorium, was going to get in a fucking suit and go somewhere in downtown Dallas where a lot of money was going to be spent and flashy people. And I was going home to Irving and having a fucking pizza. But he was cool to talk to and hang out with in the locker room. I think they knew their spot was safe, even from the Midnight Express, because of, Gino most of the time went to the booking meetings, which was a big crew, but it was David Manning, it was Bronco Lubitsch, it was Fritz himself, it was Ken Mantell, the babysitter, the booker. Gary Hart usually went and represented whatever interest he had, whether it was One Man Gang or then Gino and Chris, but Gino was in there too, and they knew that we had come over there kind of under duress, so that they also knew before we did that we weren't going to get a run with the Von Erichs. So it wasn't like they were trying to cut our nuts off anyway. So we peacefully all coexisted, and they just made a lot more money for doing the same thing that we did. But Gino was a good talent. It wasn't a gimmick.
Our next question, Jim, was sent in by several people. I'll read this one from Twitter using the hashtag CornyDriveThru from Matt Quick. Seth Rollins told the story on the Edge and Christian show about Jim when he was leaving Ring of Honor for TNA, and he recalled that Jim, quote, lost his shit. Does Jim remember that conversation? What can he tell us about why he didn't want Seth to go to TNA?
Well, yes, and somebody tweeted that, and I saw that and retweeted it or whatever, that he said something about, I can't begin to speak all the expletives. But long story short, he had already said Seth Rollins was Tyler Black in Ring of Honor. And right at the time that Sinclair Broadcasting had made a decision that they were going to buy Ring of Honor and put us on television in that fall, is when Tyler Black's contract was up. And he had already decided, because he'd been there 3 or 4 years. And he was somewhat of a prodigy, because I didn't realize that he had only been in wrestling as long as he had. He was one of those guys that just kind of naturally took to the athletic part of it. But also you could tell that even though his promos weren't the best, he was a puppy with big paws. He's only like 23 years old. And even though his psychology sometimes, but once again, he was having top level matches way earlier than he should, etc. So I wanted to keep him because I thought he's going to be the fucking guy sooner. He would have been the guy in Ring of Honor. I thought he was going to be one of the guys in the business sooner or later. But he wasn't staying. He was going to go to one or the other and I could respect that, because he needed to find out, My pitch to him was sign for 2 years in Ring of Honor and let us feature you heavily and try to increase your value, and then maybe you can get more. But he didn't want to wait. And with the style those guys were working, 2 years could be a fucking gamble anyway if he could get a good spot, right? So, okay. So it wasn't necessarily that he was leaving Ring of Honor for one or the other. He was leaving Ring of Honor for one or the other. He was going to take a spot with whichever one he could get. And he had interest, and he had told me he'd had interest or spoken to people in the WWE. And he had also spoken, I can't remember who instigated it, but he got a hold of or was talked to by Terry Taylor and TNA. And obviously, you want, even if he had to go to developmental, you'd want somebody of that quality, especially that looked like that physically, and he's that tall and he looks that good. You want him in the WWE program. If he can't be yours, he needs to go to where he probably make the most money, which at the time in 2000, 11, was WWE. And they would take him to developmental, which he still needed some of, right? So that wasn't a big fucking deal. But TNA... So anyway, he called me one day and he said, I've had a couple conversations with WWE, but I haven't heard back. And I just don't know, I guess they're not interested. But TNA, Terry Taylor has called me, and they've even Dixie talked to me, whatever. And they've offered me a contract. I'm like, oh my fucking God. And I don't want to do his business here publicly, but the contract to me would have put him, it would have basically made him indebted to them and unable to do anything else better in the business for either a year or 2 years, and tied him up for a number of dates that I didn't think they were even going to run in that calendar year. And as I turned out, I was right about that. And also, so they would have had the right to book him out to where God knows where. And also, and the money as a minimum guarantee was insulting if they intended to actually feature him in any position to me. And they just, instead, we'll just put him on the card and see what happens. And we know what happens in TNA with guys they just put on the card and see what happens. Or the top guys for that matter. That's when I told him for the first time, I said, TNA doesn't get guys over, they get guys under. And so anyway, I said, please let me, because he was trying to explain to me the contract. I said, can I just see it? He'd already told me the money offer, so really I just need to see the verbiage and how bad an indentured servant he was going to be to these people. And when I saw it was pretty fucking indentured. And I got back with him. I said, look, change 2 or 3 things, just minor things. Basically call Terry Taylor and say, hey, could we do this or do that? It wasn't asking for more money because I knew they weren't really going to do that, or they would have made him this fucking offer. But it was valid questions to ask, just to see basically if we could buy him some time. Because, and I said, and make one more call, please, God, please. And anyway, I haven't listened to the show in question, so I can't remember whether it was that after I know he got back with Terry and asked him those questions or asked him if he could change something or whatever, just to make it a little longer, because I knew that would take a while, because also those guys weren't, that on the ball in those days anyway on getting right back to you. And I don't know whether Seth called the WWE office one more time or the serendipity just happened. I think they actually, in the couple of days, they just called him. Whatever. I don't know. But anyway, suddenly he got to call, and glory, hallelujah. He calls me and said, they just called. I said, what did you tell him? He said, I told him I'm going. I said, well, good. Thank God. But anyway, I threw my body on him like I used to see when I was a kid watching TV. When the live hand grenade would go in, the hero would throw his body on the live hand grenade to save everyone else. TNA was the grenade, and I threw my body on top of it to keep Tyler Black from becoming Jack Me Off in TNA instead of Seth Rollins in the WWE. Just my little contribution.
Have you noticed, other than Dixie and Voldemort, every single other person at work behind the scenes there, it seems like, has a job with the WWE now, behind the scenes?
Yeah.
All right. Well,
there's reasons for that, because all those people halfway knew what they were doing if you'd fucking leave them alone.
Our next question was sent in to CornyDriveThru@gmail.com from Mike Noren in the Catskills here in New York. My question is, during your time in the wrestling business, what are some of the best and worst excuses you've heard for talent not showing up? For example, I drank too much piss, and now I'm not feeling well, so I can't work the match tonight.
Well, the AM/PM was always my favorite. Because, and actually, see, once again, this is like every great wrestling finish. The AM/PM is credible. It is born out of a legitimate happening. But you know what the AM/PM is?
Yeah, you say you set your alarm for 6 p.m., but it was you thought it was 6 a.m.,
but it was actually 6. Yes, and so then it began a series of events, a chain of occurrences where then I missed my flight, and then I blah 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 or whatever the fuck. That was one of the first. I'm trying to think. I believe it may have been the first taping when Delirious had been named the booker of Ring of Honor, and so already and I was at the time, I was helping out as the executive producer, which is, the on-air figure and trying to help whatever the fuck, right? But Delirious has been named the booker. That's when Adam Pearce got sideways with the office staff. And it's his first TV taping, and he's already not nervous, but he's got a million things going on and trying to keep track of shit. And it was one of those 2-day HDNet Ring of Honor TV tapings where you're doing like 3 or 4 shows per night. It's 2 months worth of TV in 2 days. And it's just hectic. It was just very hectic. In that, I haven't seen it since they redid it, but if anybody ever asked the shittiest arena I've ever been in, and I've worked fucking county fairs in Dyersburg, Tennessee, where I had sand in my crotch for a week, and I still enjoyed it better than that fucking toilet arena, ECW arena, 2300 arena, whatever fucking arena they were calling it in Philly at the time, with the used condom and drug use materials out in the back parking lot and the fucking overflowing toilets and the no air conditioning in the goddamn, or air for that matter, in the locker rooms, and the ball sweat that clung to the inside nose hairs of your nostrils for fucking weeks afterwards. But I digress. So we're back there and he comes running out. He says, and I like this guy, and I'm not trying to knock him, but Skull Crusher Rashay Brown is this big and ginormous, big-pawed, bald-headed, mean-looking black guy from Chicago, I think it was originally. But I don't know whether he was in Chicago then or even somewhere even farther away. But he's not going to be here. What the fuck? He AM/PM'd himself. What he did was he AM/P, or this is what he was using, because his alarm didn't go off. He missed the flight to Philadelphia. I said, "But there's no backup flight?" He said, "Yeah, but it's more money." All right. He said, "But he wants us to pay for it." See, that's where the fucking first executive decision that I made in Ring of Honor actually came in. I said, wait a minute. There is a flight available to him for like another $100 and something, and he's a professional, and he's coming to do 2 days of HDNet television taping for Ring of Honor Wrestling. And he can get on this flight if the mistake he made is rectified by him paying $100 and something, but instead he wants us to pay for it. And we ain't going to pay for it. Tell him it's okay. He don't need to come tomorrow either because he's done. And he was done. But I mean, there's been every fucking excuse in the world. I mean, down to the dog ate my homework. But Watts used to have it when you'd come in late, much less not get there, just you'd come in late. I had a flat tire. You should have fixed your fucking flat before you started, which was his way of saying leave early because shit happens. There have been excuses, obviously valid. Medical emergencies in the family, labors in pregnancy. I used to also in OVW because I knew the kids were in training and they needed jobs, except in extreme cases. I actually got to work my real job. But a lot of guys will just try to fucking, but AM/PM is one of my favorites.
How many times did you hear from not the talent, but the actual wife or girlfriend, or I doubt any parents, maybe a dad or two, but how many times did you not hear from the wrestler, hear from someone in the wrestler's camp giving the excuse?
Oh my God. I'm trying to think. Not that much, to be honest with you. Well, obviously in OVW, if I got it instead of Danny or Rip Rogers at some point, or whoever might have been responsible for that particular group at that time or whatever, it was never. I never got it in the OVW. I never got anything from parents. I mean, the guys, they were cool, but they would let you know. But a lot of times they would call into the office and I'd get handed the note, because there was people there. In Smoky Mountain Wrestling, I never really talked to or had any issue with any family members other than Jake's wife, who I don't recall booking, but had not only came, but had an opinion on Jake's pay that superseded Jake's, and etc. And Ricky Steamboat's wife, who I never actually spoke to, but he just called me and told me that she had just let him know that he couldn't do the date that he'd agreed to for me. So I got to be honest with you. I don't know if I would take a lot of call. I mean, I would take a fucking call from somebody's family, but not about their guy. When I talked to Sid's wife in the WWF, when I called him, Vince said, have Sid Vicious in San Antonio ready to be on Raw Monday. I don't care that he's injured and can't work. He will do an interview. He's still working here and we're paying him. Tell him if he does not come to San Antonio and do this appearance on Raw, that we will rectify the situation where we won't be paying him anymore. So I have to call Sid up and say that, but fortunately, he was off at a softball tournament, and so his wife I was able to delay that information to her and that a plane ticket would be coming. And that's when she told me that, Sid thinks he'd be happier if he went back to selling farm chemicals. And then that was the night he came to San Antonio, did the tease on the stage in the opening segment. And then before the promo with all the other top baby faces in Seg 8, he told fucking Downtown Bruno that he was having chest pains, thought he was having a heart attack. And Bruno said, "Do you want me to take you to the hospital?" He said, "No, just take me back to the Holiday Inn." And he took him back to his hotel. He never did the fucking promo. We're looking around Seg 7. Where's Sid? He's next. As Bruno just comes back in sweating because it was fucking July in San Antonio. I've never seen the humidity. You walked outside, it was like getting hit in the face with a bucket of fucking warm water. Bruno comes in, looks like somebody's turned a bucket of water over his fucking head, panting and sweating. And I said, "Where's Sid?" He said, "I just got back. I took him to the hotel." I said, "Why?" He thinks he's having a heart attack. So you took him to the fucking hotel? What the fuck? Is the goddamn maintenance man a fucking heart surgeon? Well, that's where he wanted to go. I said, "You took the advice of a man under the influence of a fucking heart attack." So I go back, I tell Vince, I said, "Vince, Sid thinks he's having a heart attack." Vince said, "Where is he?" I said, "He's at the Holiday."
What did Vince say?
Shortly afterwards, that's where Sid's check stopped coming. And that was when I think he did this with Warrior 2. So I don't want to misspeak and slander. So if anybody wants to correct me on these details, but I think that's when he sent Sid a letter saying that he was going to prorate his fucking pay to the appearances that he makes. Instead of him getting his whole minimum check or whatever every week, he was going to split it up amongst the ones he makes and the ones he didn't. I don't think Sid took that. I think he left shortly after that.
Well, our next question, Jim, was sent in via email to CornyDriveThru@gmail.com from Laura. "I just listened to your interview on Busted Open. After the interview was done, Bully Ray, or Buddy Ray, as he's known to some of his friends, was going on about the things you taught him. He said, quote, you taught him the art of working without making a move. Can you explain what that means?"
I can explain what it means, maybe, but I didn't hear what he said. And there was a lot of things like in TNA, for example, because I just assumed that everybody is the same age as me and is as old as me and has watched as much wrestling as me. So I happened to mention something about something that maybe Bubba and Devon had done, looked a little old Memphis-y or whatever, or so I don't know how it came up, or we were also talking about Dutch. And I said, boy, because the Dutch at the time has had a number of injuries and was, this was 2010 or 8 or whatever. So he had, at the time, had not been wrestling regularly for, a while. I said, boy, Dutch's body language. He said, I've never seen it. I said, what? So I gave Bubba some old Memphis footage, which he had not watched old Memphis. And when he saw those matches with Lawler and Dutch and some of the other Memphis main events that I put on, and Dundee and Funk and Mantell and Idol, and he was like, my God, this is great. So he got into that genre. And another time I mentioned the angle that we did with the Garvin brothers, where we turned Jimmy babyface when I burned Ronnie with the fireball, and then Jimmy, got him back to the babyface locker room and then kicked the heel locker room door down and tackled me and ran in between. And he said, wait a minute, because I guess they did that in ECW. Somebody did, where the babyface or whoever was switching ran and kicked the door down and attacked the guy in the opposite dressing room or whatever. I said, yeah, that's where Paulie got it. He said, well, I didn't know that. So I was giving Bubba a few history lessons there, but I don't remember a specific lesson about working without moving. But the fucking point is that if you are indeed always working, if you are in the moment, in what you're doing, then you don't have to be doing anything as long as you look like you can be standing still, as long as you are reacting to or look like it's something you would stand still for. You've always got to be, no matter what part of the match or the angle or the promo or the fucking falderall, whatever the business is that's going on, you've got to always act and look like you belong there and it's normal in a shoot situation. How are you reacting? Maybe that's it. I don't know. I didn't hear the conversation, but I do a lot of fucking takes and reactions without saying anything when shit happens, because that's the way the people in a fucking big building know that something registers with you. If they can't see your face, they can see that your fucking arms went out for a second, or your body tensed up, or your head snapped to the side, or whatever it may be.
Steamboat's the best at that.
Yes, his body language is just he's very ballaic or balletic, or I don't know how you would fucking ballaic. Ballet-like, whatever the fuck. He's very graceful is what he is. I'm more Jackie Gleason body language, because really, that's when you look all the great heel wrestlers, especially, have body language from TV shows featuring great physical comedians when they grew up. Because those were the best takes and the best reactions and the best facials and the most expressive. And so Jackie Gleason, to me, has influenced more than one wrestler of that era in doing shit, reactions of shit and takes and body language.
Harley Race.
How sweet it is.
Didn't Harley Race and Jackie Gleason have a confrontation?
Yes, in Miami Beach. That's where Gleason did his show, and he was a wrestling fan. He liked wrestling and boxing back when those two things were kind of still linked in a lot of people's minds. And I think they did something, didn't they, at the Miami Beach Convention Center? And I mean, obviously not physical and didn't have a match, but it was like teasing the people they were going to do some shit and had to be pulled apart or whatever.
I forget the whole story, but that was Chris Dundee, and obviously Angelo Dundee is Ali's guy, so Chris Dundee was the wrestling promoter in Miami, so there's the boxing wrestling connection.
Well, it just also, to be honest, that's how the Cauliflower Alley Club got started. For veterans of boxing and wrestling, and those were the two ring sports. There was no MMA, and still, even at that point, it was boxing and wrestling were treated. And everybody knew there were shady parts of both. Boxing just took care of its business better on a mainstream basis and didn't get too far out, but there were the occasional faux pas. And a lot of people maybe knew wrestling was worked, but it was somewhat linked in not only the business's minds, but fans' minds. From, Joe Louis or Rocky Marciano or goddamn, obviously Primo Carnero, or whoever wrestling or being special referees. And then, a guy like Mike Mazurki, who was a wrestler and a movie star, being instrumental in the Cauliflower Alley Club because, boxing played a part too. The boxing and wrestling clubs oftentimes shared not only ownership, but promotional space and arenas back in those days.
Our next question, Jim, was sent in on Twitter using the hashtag CornyDriveThru from Tommy. Why is a time limit draw referred to as a Broadway?
That is a good question. But that was the lingo that, as far as I understand it, that, the guys like Toots Mondt and those guys came up with for the telegraph operators in those days when they started sending guys out, when the booking offices first started forming and they sent guys out to do matches and had control over the finishes, even for local promoters. We've talked about it. If Strangler Lewis's nickname was Nakusa, because he was from Nakusa, Wisconsin, right? And they used to call Roy Welch Bag Ears. So instead of telegraphing the building in Omaha that Roy Welch should defeat Strangler Lewis, it would be Bag Ears over Nakusa. So that way you wouldn't smarten up the telegraph operator or the errand boy or whoever came in contact with that. It was just gibberish and on down the line with the matches or whatever. And a time limit draw. And it's also known as going through the time limit. But it became, for that early language, a Broadway. I'm not sure why that specific term was chosen, but that's why it's called that to this day.
Our next question, Jim, was sent in via email to CornyDriveThru@gmail.com from Jimmy Davis. I'm a newer listener and have really enjoyed listening. I apologize if this has been asked before. I have a question when it comes to how wrestlers got paid before the guaranteed contracts. When you were part of the Midnight Express, were you getting paid equally between the three of you? How would that differ from the main event tag teams with no manager or to single main events? Would the promoters still pay the same amount overall and it would just get split? Or would he have to pay out more of all three of you versus, say, a single? Excuse me as I try to navigate through that there at the end.
Well, and that's hard to answer. Especially because oftentimes we've talked about the formula for determining, what the talent got. Bobby Eaton described it best as they take all the money from the show and put it in cash in a big peach basket and throw it all up in the air, and whatever sticks to the ceiling is what you pay the wrestlers. However, in a more formulaic design, and also in the Midnight Express book, I'm sorry if I'm making people salivate. I know it's not available anymore. I broke down how Jimmy Crockett on a deposition under oath tried to explain the mathematical formula for which then, of course, I applied that formula to what we actually got paid, and it didn't work. we got shorted $150 or whatever it was on that formula. But in large part, no, the promoters did pay more money to the guys in the main events than the guys in the middle card matches, and those guys got a little bit more money than the guys in the opening matches. And yes, tag team unfortunately was split more ways. Best example I can give you is that, for example, at a big house in the Superdome, when the Rock and Roll Express and the Midnight Express, well, actually, it was the one with Watson Dog was bigger. So Watson Dog and the Midnight Express and myself, I don't know what Bill Watts made because he was the boss also, but all the rest of us got $2,000 apiece. However, when Dog had main evented the Superdome on a similar house in a single match, he got more like $5 because there was only two guys in that main event. And the same thing was going on with Flair and Dusty in the NWA, and the world title match or the singles main event match would obviously, they would each get more money because they were bigger stars and they were drawing it. But yeah, but at the same time, most guys in a tag team have to say, would I be in this main event position at all as a single to make this money, even split this 5 ways or 4 ways, or with a manager 5? And the answer a lot of times was probably not. So, you didn't complain too bad. Some guys always complained, and they didn't understand the economics of wrestling payoffs, even the crooked ones that the promoters used, still had some tenuous grasp on reality. And then also, I was usually always paid the same thing as the Midnight Express, except for 2 weeks in Dallas. And here's why. Because before Bobby and Dennis and I went to Mid-South Wrestling, there was no Midnight Express. So Bill Watts established the precedent. I don't even think he always paid his wrestlers or his managers that weren't wrestling the same thing as the guys, but he thought that we were a 3-man team, and he paid us all 3 equally for the time we were there. And so when we went to Dallas, that was just kind of what we did, and none of us had a problem with that. And the first check I got, or the first week, the first check I got, because we only got checks for a week in those days. The first check I got, immediately, I said, Jesus Christ, what is this? And I said, whatever it was about $150 or $200 shorter than what Bobby's and Dennis's was. I said, oh, fuck, you think they fucked up? I hate to go in now bitching about my money first week, but we all 3 went in and asked Ken Mantell, said, is this a mistake? He said, well, we don't usually pay the managers what we pay the wrestlers. And that's when, Bobby was right there and raising his hand, but Dennis did the speaking and said, well, that's been our deal with Watts. At Corny is we're a 3-man team and we all 3 get the same thing. And they fixed it. So, and that's the only, and then later on, obviously, when we went to Crockett, it was just accepted, and then we started getting into guaranteed contracts, and then that fucking idiot Hurd, I tried to explain that principle to him when he was offering me more money than the Midnight, and I've told that story before, but for the new listeners, from $225,000 each that we had the last contract we had with Jim Crockett, he first offered me $100,000 and Stan and Bobby $75,000 apiece. And what? And finally, I kept telling him, look, because I didn't want to blow the fucking deal, right? And because I figured this guy might not last long, and we'd be leaving our home here, and it's guaranteed money. I kept trying to get him to give when he got at 100 for me, I was okay. But I was trying to get him to give the Midnight Express more money. And he finally, by the time I got him up to 125 for them, I was at 150. The fucking idiot gave me $50,000 I wasn't even asking for, and was telling him, I don't want more money. I've got to have more money for Bobby Eaton and Stan Lane. So anyway, that's where he stopped. And we took that for, what was it, 1.5 years, and then fucking told him to shove it up his ass.
Well, he was great with those contract negotiations. Didn't he get Randy Savage in there? And he's like, I really want to sell you on WCW. And then he was like, he offered him like whatever, like, give me $500 a week.
Yeah, well, no, I mean, it was like 150 or 200 grand or whatever. I don't fucking know. And yeah, sure.
Our next question, Jim, was sent in via email to CornyDriveThru@gmail.com from Charlie in Starkville, Mississippi. I was listening to an interview with Shane Douglas, and he was laughing about how much of a wimp Shawn Michaels was. He said when he was working for the WWF, Shawn Michaels was still with the Rockers. Marty Jannetty got angry with Shawn, and when he went into the locker room to confront him, Shawn rolled up in the fetal position on the locker room floor. For a guy that started so much BS with other guys in the business, was Shawn really that much of a wimp?
Well, I was not there for the story in question. That was before my time. I think that's when Shane was there as a young, fiery babyface instead of a fucking college professor, right?
91, yeah.
Yeah. But so I can't speak to that, but no, Shawn Michaels is for life in actual real locker room excursions. And two things, his giant 7-foot bodyguard in real life who was working with him, and or his position as a main event guy is the only reason that a bunch of people didn't just knock the fuck out of him. And including me. Fucking what? Well, I wasn't going to fight him. I told Jack Lanza one night after he chewed me and Jose Lothario out in Anaheim. I'm not even going to go into the whole thing there, but yelled at us for taking attention away. The fucking fat manager and the 60-year-old trainer in the back of the arena being chased out took attention away from him and Vader. Yelled at us. I told Jack Lanza, I said, if he yells at me and Jose in front of the boys like that again, you're going to have a 4-foot tall fucking WWF champion because I'm going to shoot both of his fucking kneecaps. But he didn't anymore, and I didn't. Ron and Don Harris, I can't. Which one snatched him and which one was watching the door? Probably Ron snatched him, but he had just angered the Harris boys for whatever reason, just being himself during that time, and they decided their last night there in the garden, Ron went in the locker room and snatched him by the fucking throat and held him up against the wall with his goddamn feet dangling while Don was watching the door. And I heard, because I was not once again in the room, that it was something along the lines of, I just wanted to let you know that I would beat the fuck out of you, but you're not even worth it type of thing. And then people heard scuffling and came in. Or Bret Hart or whatever. No, Shawn's never, or the Marine. No, Shawn's never whipped anybody.
You mean Marines. Marines.
No, the Marine, the drunk Marine that he mouthed off to and insulted his girlfriend or whatever.
I thought it was a gang of Marines.
Well, there was a bunch of them there watching it. From what Davey Boy Smith informed me the fucking day after, because he was in the back seat. That's why Davey could have saved Shawn, but he couldn't get out of the back seat of the 2-door car.
Our next question, Jim, was sent in to CornyDriveThru at gmail.com from Phil Mantagas. Hey guys, first of all,
wait a minute, Phil Mantagas what?
I don't know. That's his name here.
Philmus and Intagus? Phil Mantagas.
Hey guys, first of all, as always, thank you for entertaining us, each and every single week. Makes my job work so much better.
I don't know whether we entertain people every week. If we hit every couple, I think we're doing good, but go ahead.
My question is about Starrcade 95, when Bobby Heenan remarks about some team training up at, when Bobby Heenan remarks about some team training up and wrestling in the Smoky Mountains, Tony Schiavone makes the comment, the Smoky Mountains, nobody wrestles in the Smoky Mountains. Considering this was December 95, it has to be a cheap shot directed at Jim. Did he just laugh it off? Or was he kind of bitter about it for a while? I know that he and Tony get along very well these days, but what's the story?
Well, no, that was but I don't think Tony just came up with that out of his ass for no reason. No, that's the kind of stuff. Remember, that'll put asses in seats. Bischoff would sit there and go, say this, just like Vince a lot of times would sit there and go, say this. And they'd be venting their transgressions with each other through the announcers. But no, I as soon as I heard about it, I knew who had obviously asked Tony to say that. He didn't just come up with that for no reason. But that was a receipt for when during their, 94, they had a world tag team title change on Nitro with Harlem Heat and somebody in Johnson City, Tennessee, and Freedom Hall, and somehow the whole row opposite the hard camera right at the finish held up a banner that said, "We want it raw," right during the finish of the world tag title change. I don't know how that happened. That was was that the same night, I believe it was, that this attractive, well drawn, artistically crafted sign that said JC, because they're in Johnson City, big red heart, '*S, loves Eric Jackoff. And it was close enough that they shot it, and then they realized, and they're like, oh, shit. But yeah, so it was a receipt.
What did you think about that during the Monday Night Wars when it really became like an arms race with the fans on each show bringing signs and their own personal inside jokes? Sometimes people knew what the signs were saying. Sometimes they were pretty explicit. What did you think of the rise of the signs in the 90s?
Well, I liked it because it looked like such a great atmosphere on television. When that building was full and everybody had a sign about something, it looked like everybody was into that shit, which they were. And it really, unless it was something that, would get you in trouble with TV station, I didn't give a fuck. I wasn't as hard-hearted as the rest of the office was about confiscating shit. Because just don't shoot it, right? But, if somebody was obviously what I was trying to do, sabotage the program, if somebody was trying to do that, yeah, you got to fucking put a stop to it. But they shouldn't have been running my town. But I loved the signs and shit. It made the program look hotter and the atmosphere look wilder and et cetera, et cetera. I didn't have any problem with that. And there's no reason why that people couldn't do that again. It wasn't the audience taking over the show. It was the audience supporting and being a great background for the show. Now all they want to do is chant and or fucking, complain if they don't get their way, but they don't want to work to be a good background. They want us to see. The wrestlers used to be the conductors and the fans were the orchestra. Now the fucking fans are all these fucking people sitting there waiting for the goddamn wrestler to set himself on fire, writing and singing the song. It's backwards.
Our next submission here, Jim, isn't a question as much as a comment from James.
So it's not, is it a submission or an emission?
Well, we'll find out in a moment here. Hi, Jim. I listened to your last drive-through and you said every morning you clean the glasses with bathroom tissue. Even bathroom tissue can scratch the lenses. I personally have delegated an old pair of briefs, no longer in the rotation, for this task. The fabric is soft and it won't scratch. This sort of reminds me of the old column in the newspaper, Hints from Heloise. And that's James's attempt to
submission or emission. Yeah. Well, and thank you, James, very much. The next time that I want to take something that's been jammed up in my fucking crotch or my taintal area and wrapped around my balls and fucking wipe it all over something I'm going to stick on my face right next to my nose and my mouth, I'll be sure to take your advice.
Our next question, Jim, was sent in on Twitter using the hashtag CornyDriveThru from the legendary Jarfunk Felonious. I live just south of you in E-Town. Huge fan and remembering a wrestler from the 80s called Lasertron. Wondering who the fellow was. Seems like he was getting pushed. He tagged with Boogie Woogie.
Lasertron was a friend to the children, is who Lasertron was. Remember that? The protector of the children. It was Hector Guerrero, and I love Hector. He's a great guy. And he was a great worker and a great talent, but Dusty, they were so overloaded with talent. They didn't have a spot. Hector, he had worked for Dusty many times before and in Florida and et cetera. I guess Dusty wanted to use him, but they didn't really have any top spot or anything. But Dusty got an idea to come up with Lasertron. He was kind of like a fucking video game, like an updated Ultraman. I don't know what the fuck that, the kids might like, because Hector could do all the flying stuff and all the, the lucha moves and everything. And that's what they did. And to kind of make him more popular, because that's Jimmy Valiant was still incredibly over in the Carolinas, and he had some appeal on the national television, but he was winding down. It was starting to be, because he'd been in the business. He was in his mid-40s at that point. So the best use of Jimmy was to give him a young baby face that can sell in tag matches, and then he can just take the tag and make a comeback, a few things, and, hit an elbow drop, whatever. So Lasertron served that purpose. And Rocky King, because Rocky King was that kid from the Carolinas. He had a great personality. His physique was incredible. He was ripped, had like 1% fucking body fat on him. He looked freaky. And he was a nice guy. And he was Dusty always liked to use black baby faces down south because there was a lot of black fans that would come to see him. So he'd always try to find one, and he wanted to push Rocky. And Rocky was not the greatest promo, but he was athletic as all fuck, but he was awkward. So Jimmy was his partner, and we had matches with him, the Midnight and I, especially when we first got there in 85. And I remember one night in goddamn this small town in Virginia, finally they decided, Handsome said, get some heat on me, brother. Get some heat on me and give Rocky the tag. Let Rocky make the comeback. Because it's not like Jimmy was going to work all that hard, but it was a nice house and everything. And wanted to give Rocky a moment. And fucking Jimmy finally makes a tag, and Rocky goes to jump in over the top rope, and he's so fired up. he's going to jump right in over the top rope and just start punching and drop kicking the Midnight Express, and he hangs his toe. He could jump too, but he hung his toe underneath the top rope, and he had jumped so high that it more or less gave him his own backdrop right into the fucking middle of the ring, flat of his fucking, and those ropes had the garden hoses around them. I think that's what the problem was anyway. They weren't taped down good, and they spun on him, and they went pop, 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 pop. And he just landed there, and Bobby and Dennis both look like they're staggering. What do we do now? And he hops back up, and everything he threw from that point was a potato. Because, you got to make up for it, right? But anyway, yes, Jimmy had a lot of young, fiery babyface partners like Rocky King and Lasertron, the protector of the children.
Our next question, Jim, was sent in on Twitter using the hashtag CornyDriveThru from Sean McCarty. I've always loved the story Jim told about the Iron Sheik and Fred Lampson. Do you have any more Iron Sheik stories locked away that you're willing to share? I don't even know what that story is.
But the commissioner.
Oh, yes.
The commissioner and the microphone. Well, now that we've teased it, we'll look like dicks if we don't. I'm sorry if you've heard this one, but for the newer listeners, Fred Lampson was the athletic commissioner, the chairman in the state of Kentucky, and he had taken over from the previous commissioner, Frank Scroy, who had been in the 50s, one of the boys, and had wrestled and knew what was going on. But now they got a new governor, and it's a political appointment, and all of a sudden here comes Fred Lampson along, and he is the one who, when Jerry Lawler and Terry Funk were having the double juice pull apart in the gardens with 15 guys trying to pull them apart, he got on the microphone and go, "Okay, boys, the match is over. Break it up." And Lawler looks down and says, "If you think it's over, you get your ass in here and try to break it up." And he would always come in all verklempt, his tie up around his neck and wringing his hands and telling Christine Jarrett, "Oh, this and that and the other thing." Fred Lampson is the one who sent a letter to Christine Jarrett saying that he had seen the Battle Royal and the previous week, and they could not have any more because since if you're thrown over the top rope, it's a disqualification, and the match is over. You can't have Battle Royals because if you had a 20-man Battle Royal, you'd have 19 winners because when you throw the guy over the top rope, it's a disqualification. He also suspended and fined Jonathan Boyd of the Sheep Herders. He suspended him for knocking out the referee, Tommy Marlin, in a match the previous week, and the problem was they were setting up the angle to do the loser leave town match the following week, so Jerry Jarrett had to pay a $250 fine for Jonathan Boyd hitting the referee in the finish to get him reinstated to come back the next week and lose the loser leave town match. So he didn't understand how – he was sort of like the Jim Hurt of his day in Kentucky. He didn't understand how wrestling worked. And anyway – one of the rules that he instituted was the guys would get on the microphone and yell at each other. And that was no, unless you are a licensed ring announcer, you're not allowed to talk on the PA system, on the microphone. So what the and Ms. Jarrett's like, go along with it. And I'm the fill-in ring announcer that night. And part of the deal with the Sheik was that he would get, don't say USA on the microphone. I'm like, Ms. Jarrett, what if don't let the Sheik have the microphone? Because the commissioner's here. Because he didn't come all the time. Oh, shit. So I'm sitting there, and here comes the Sheik around the ring doing his entrance, and he's walking down the side of the ring. I'm trying to catch his eye. I've got the microphone, and as he gets closer, I said, "Don't get the microphone. The commissioner's here." He leans over. He's, "Give me the microphone." I said, "No, don't get the microphone. The commissioner's here." "Give me the microphone." I said, "No, don't get the microphone. The commissioner's here." And he pulls my hand up in front of his fucking face with the microphone still in my hand, holding my wrist in his grip. And he says, "Fuck the commissioner." And it goes all over the goddamn Louisville Gardens. And the people, and then he says, "Hey, don't say USA," and Hakapatu and all his stuff, right? And he gets in the ring, and here comes fucking Fred Lampson with his, still wore a hat like he was in a 50s fucking movie. And the tie around his fucking neck, and his cheeks are red. We used to call him Mr. Fudd because he resembled Elmer Fudd. And he's coming down the aisle at me, pointing at me like, "You let him have him." What am I supposed to do? I'm fucking 17, motherfucker, right? I'm going to fucking stretch the Iron Sheik. But it was Sheik stories we were looking for.
That's right, not Fred Simpson.
That was that one, but there was another one. The Sheik once again, he's this crazy. This was before he went to the WWF and got kind of be the funny Iron Sheik, right? This Iron Sheik was trying to step the original Sheik up one. He was an Arab. He was real legitimate, though, from the Middle East, right? And he could speak the language and all that stuff. But he had the mustache, but he was a shooter wrestler. He had the big belly, but everybody knows he was a shooter in his youth. And he's doing the violence, too. He and Ron Bass had a fucking Texas death match, and Sheik comes out with a goddamn carving knife, like out of your kitchen knife block set. And I've got a picture of him. He's sawing Ron Bass's head with it, and Bass has got juice, right? And he's bleeding. I'm like, fuck, this is strong. He was really trying to get over as a heel in 82 because he knew he was going to work with Lawler. And another thing he was doing, he was throwing the fire like the Sheik. So one week they were going to go around with Lawler versus the Sheik, and Sheik was being managed by Jimmy Hart. And they kept having problems with the fire. And now everybody knew Lawler had been throwing fire for years, but now the Iron Sheik comes in and he can throw fire. So it might be very well a battle of the fireballs, which is, we can't wait to see this. But one night, fucking in Louisville, I swear to God, I saw both of these successive nights. Jimmy Hart and the Sheik, and I think somebody else from the First Family, they've got in there and they're kicking the shit out of Lawler, the heat after the match that you used to see, that actually used to make people mad enough to come back the next week, where after the match was over, everybody didn't shake hands and fucking hug and kiss each other and suck each other's balls, and the fans didn't applaud their fighting spirit. If the babyface slipped over, then the heel kicked the shit out of him, and they've tried to get some people to climb in the ring, and you want to see come back next week and see what's going to happen. Anyway, so the Sheik and fucking Jimmy Hart, whoever else, are kicking a dog shit out of fucking Jerry Lawler, and they've thrown the referee out of the ring, and the bell is ringing, and the people are crowding around the ring, and now they hold Lawler up, and the Sheik goes in his tights, and he goes in, you can see he's got something in his left hand, and I'm smart enough, I know he's going to throw the fire, right? And he's fucking, with his right hand, he's doing something, and I didn't know what, and nothing happened, and finally they just gave up and just fucking dropped Lawler and started putting the boots to him again. I found out later on Jimmy Hart is saying, the Sheik is saying, Jimmy, it want to strike. It want to strike. The lighter's out. The lighter won't work, right? Jimmy, it want to strike. It want to strike. So the next night, right, they get a brand new fucking lighter, because now the fucking difference is, because it's Evansville. I don't even know if Lawler and Sheik was coming back the following week. It may, because Lawler didn't like to go to Evansville all that often. So there was going to be a reversal where Lawler was going to throw the fire to fucking Sheik. And they get a brand new lighter. Make sure, right? No, I know they were coming back because they did fucking promos. I'll tell you why in a minute. But Lawler's going to throw the fire to Sheik. Oh, goddamn. Now this time you see Lawler fucking do whatever, and the Sheik is down, and I see Lawler go in his tights and get his fucking thing, and I see he does something. His paper got wet. The flash paper is wet because he's had it in his tights. He's wrestled. It's the summertime. He's fucking sweating something. I don't know what the fuck. Now the paper won't work. So he realizes in his mind, they've already done the interviews. They shot the interviews that the previous Monday night in Memphis for next week in Evansville, where Lawler talks about lighting that fucking Iron Sheik's face up like a Roman candle, baby. So he's got to do something. So he starts battering the Iron Sheik. Sheik jumps out of the ring, and Lawler takes the fucking Bic lighter. It's turned up all the way or whatever, and he fights the Iron Sheik completely around the Evansville Coliseum, flicking the Bic lighter in the Sheik's face so that everybody individually can see that he's burned the Sheik. And the Sheik's going, oh, it's hot, And that way, the next week when the people on TV saw the interview, they go, yeah, he burned the fuck out of him. He did it right next in front of me, of section 5, row C, seat fucking 4. He flicked that lighter right in his fucking face. All the way around the building, through the people, up into fucking bleachers, everywhere.
Well, with that, the drive-thru has closed.
All I'm going jacking it. I'll see you later.
Hey, listen, before you go jacking it, we want to remind everyone, every episode of The Experience and the Drive-Thru, when it goes up, it's also up on the official Jim Cornette YouTube channel, which is tinyurl.com/official Corny YouTube, or just go to YouTube and search for Jim Cornette. Each week, the show goes up with exclusive Travis Heckel artwork, and people have really been going crazy over the Travis Heckel artwork.
Yes, but it won't go up with jacking it. Because that's copyrighted.
It won't go up with jacking it. That's copyrighted, although maybe we'll do a cover version.
Not the concept, just the actual performance of that song. But I've pretty much been jacking it every day in my professional and personal life.
Well, the concept, too, we won't have any jacking it on the actual channel. But for everything else in the Jim Cornette universe, go to tinyurl.com/official Corny YouTube and check that out. Spread the word, subscribe, and please check out some of the videos on there. More to come. So a good time to subscribe being right now. Of course, you can follow Jim on Twitter at @TheJimCornette. You can follow me on Twitter at GreatBrianLast. You can hear me on the 605 Superpodcast at 605pod.com, or available wherever it is that you find your favorite podcast, the mothership, as they call it. Of course, Cornette's Collectibles at JimCornette.com for burger towels, DVDs, autograph photos with money going towards cancer research, I guess is the best way to put it. Cancer research. Also, T-shirts, autograph photos. I'm forgetting a number of things, but there's so much.
Just everything.
Everything. JimCornette.com and Cornette's Collectibles. Of course, you can hear us on the Jim Cornette Experience when it debuts each and every Thursday, or listen on the YouTube page. And once again, that is available wherever it is that you find your favorite podcasts. This episode of the Drive-Thru has been sponsored by the Law Office of Stephen P. New. What's that number, Jim?
888-692-8084. Stephen P. New. Get even with Stephen. And don't forget, you can also catch up with me in Charlotte on April 27th. I'll be doing the color commentary for the NWA Crockett Cup broadcast from the Cabarrus Arena in Concord, and the Rock and Roll and Midnight Express, together amongst others, will be part of the special VIP meet and greet, April 27th. More information, JimCornette.com.
Until next week, and until the Experience, for Jim Cornette, I'm the Great Brian Last. Tally-ho!